Welcome back live. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your host, Rob Moore, podcasting, as always, from the Bucket Works location here in the Grand Avenue Mall in downtown Milwaukee. With me is a host of folk today, including co-hosts Brian Edward. What's going on, Brian?
I am doing quite good, the Irish one, and I get to talk to Mandisa, so I'm fired up.
How about it? And also with me is a frequent contributor, Megan Ivano. Say hi, Megan.
Hey, everybody.
Featuring today as well, Antonio with Myth of the Day in his time. We are together, as always, keeping the all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement. No bigger mover today than Mandisa Thomas herself, the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, calling us fresh off a meeting of the same there in Atlanta. Say hi, Mandisa. What's going on?
Hey there. How's everyone doing today?
Doing real good. We are looking forward, of course, to your arrival in a short week from now for Myth Information Conference 2 on September 27th. Get your tickets now at mythicistmilwaukee.com. Are you ready to come to Milwaukee?
I am. This will be my first time in the area, and I am very excited about it. I'm also very excited about the conference, as well as presenting to you all, as well as just being in the area, getting to know everyone, getting to see everyone, and so I'm excited about it.
Never been to Milwaukee before? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, this will be my first time.
Nice.
It's my first time in the state of Wisconsin and in Milwaukee.
All right.
You are in for a treat.
Cream City, Brew City.
Awesome.
You can, get a little time to do some sightseeing. We'll see. But, of course, we're going to be meeting you Saturday and hanging out at John Hawk's Pub on the river Saturday night at, 6:30, Sean? For a pre-party, including all the speakers, Killer Priest himself and David Fitzgerald and Arthur George. All of you will be there, and we'll be rubbing elbows and hobnobbing downtown so you can get to see the beautiful Riverwalk and the lovely center of Milwaukee right away. And what do you think about that? Are you looking forward to partying with Killer Priest?
I am. I am somewhat of a Wu-Tang fan. Grew up on hip hop, and certainly that was one of the groups that I grew up listening to. So this is very much an honor for me, and I'm very, very excited to be sharing the bill, but also just a love for hip hop as well. So I'm very, very excited about that because when we think about atheism and how to connect with others, most likely it's often through the authors and the literary scholars and science, but that we connect as well, and music is one of them. Us showing our love for music as non-believers or people who have questioned religion, I think that's another important aspect because that shows that we're able to relate to others. And so this is something that is very, very exciting for me to actually meet a member of Wu-Tang Clan and to also just vibe on that level too.
It's true, of course. Wu-Tang. Maybe we're dating ourselves a little bit, but I remember, even with my musical taste, it doesn't really run down the hip hop vein. But Wu-Tang was like a force to be reckoned with. We all knew it in the '90s, and so yeah, we're all looking forward to meeting him and hearing more about his personal views and his actual really interesting take on spirituality and mysticism that really runs through his music.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This would be very, very interesting, because there are artists that don't necessarily talk about it. There are some who are expressing this a bit more. Rathcast, for example, is one of them. But especially to have, someone who is a part of a well-known, phenomenal hip-hop group, as well as seeing, a black woman atheist. That'd be very monumental. In addition to the other wonderful, David Fitzgerald was just awesome. But just that is monumental in itself. That we're still black women who are non-believers we are still very rare in our visibility, and this is something that, of course, we're hoping to change. But now this is this is the perfect opportunity for us to show that we are here, and hopefully, I know I'll be learning something, from Killer Priest, as well as I hope that he'll be able to learn something from me and the rest of us. So, this will be very, very interesting.
It's what's exciting to me is the actual diversity of what we have going on, and my talk to begin the program will center around that. When we talk about secularism and atheism, we have the rare opportunity to bridge the gap between all cultures and all sexual preferences, sexual orientations, gender. Really, it doesn't. Atheism and free thought and rational thinking doesn't limit itself to any one group of people. So when you really take a look at it, we have a more diverse demographic than virtually anybody, and we're going to really showcase that here. Not only with, like you said, a couple of great black speakers, but a woman, and now you've launched yourself right into the top position. We've talked about that before. You are both a top female and a top black atheist in the country, and that's. It's both exciting for you, but also, shocking to have to say that at this late date that we don't have a whole lot of other public figures to look to for that. So here we are with a couple. And since we've talked, Arian Foster has come out. Now, how big was that for the community?
Yeah, this has been very, very interesting. That was the cover story for a good week or two on ESPN, that he came out as being openly secular and a non-believer. And we've publicly pledged our support for him as an organization. And of course, we were hoping that he might be able to participate somewhat in our upcoming 5th anniversary celebration. But I think that's probably not going to happen. But we're still showing our support for him. I think it was a great thing. I know a couple of years ago he was featured in an article where he expressed his humanism, but for him to be the first active player to express his non-belief is just monumental, not just as a black man, but just as a non-believer in general. It was just amazing and awesome, because now it shows how much headway that we really are making, how many strides we are making, just as being secular. Because I think that's something that is important. The NFL is full of, they express a lot of religious drivel, and but also there are some very interesting things that seem to go on behind the scenes, especially with some of these players. And I think it's a welcome breath of fresh air to have someone openly express his non-belief in humanism. And hopefully this will lead to more folks coming out or being open about it. And I wish it wouldn't take a celebrity, but at the same time, that the hope that might be what we need as well, to have more notable names out there. But hopefully, more folks will just come on their own, especially when they see that they have the support of organizations like Black Nonbelievers and the other organizations around the country, and including yours, Mrs. Milwaukee.
Yeah, when someone comes out that's right in the public view, celebrity or athlete, it is an inspiration saying, hey, they're really putting themselves out there, and there isn't, they didn't burst into flames, it gives inspiration for others to come out and say, I can do it. If they went ahead and did it, I can do it. I have less to lose than some $1 million contract, and that's why I think it's important we have well-known people come out, because they seem to have more to lose, their reputation. And go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's it's inspirational for the entire community too, and I keep saying this. It seems to be magnified when a black atheist comes out, because the community seems, in the minds of the people, to be so tied to religion. But on the other side of it, we as white atheists, welcome so much minority atheists coming out, because it makes it look like our movement is less of an old grumpy white guys movement, which is kind of one of the problems that we face, I think, in the minds of the public. So the NFL being absolutely rife with religion anyway, it's not just a black players deal. Most of those locker rooms are filthy with religion. White, Latino, Hawaiian, Samoan, black players, all of them. So for Arian Foster to do that, even if he doesn't want to be more active than that, and I have no idea where his mindset is, he's busy this time of year, but even if he doesn't want to do anything else or doesn't have the time, just him being out, that it really speaks volumes, and does just a million great things for the effort. So
so many people don't believe in God, and they never even think about it. They don't think it's important to come out because it's just never been a part of their life, so they don't consider themselves atheists. It just isn't a part of their life, full stop.
Right.
And here in Milwaukee, you're saying for people to have this soft place to land, a place to go to, like Black Nonbelievers, and we don't have that here in Milwaukee, and I think we need it here in Milwaukee.
Actually, you do. You do.
What?
There's a Black Nonbelievers of Milwaukee. It's been around for the next few months. We're working on developing more events with them. It's run by Damian Jones, who is very active with the Assist Milwaukee folks. So there is one there, and I will tell you that one of the most common phrases that we hear, especially amongst black atheists, was, "I thought I was the only one." Now, I'm sure that there are many of us from any background who hear that, but if you are from a demographic that is still underrepresented, whether you're black, you're a woman, Hispanic, ex-Muslim, someone who isn't pretty much predominantly white, you definitely hear this more often than not. And it's often, I don't always think that what I'm doing is revolutionary. I try not to look at it like that. I always appreciate the accolades that I receive, but I do realize that to be an open atheist, an open non-believer, especially coming from a community that is very highly religious, it is still a big thing. But it's a big thing because there's a lot of curiosity surrounding atheism and non-belief and what it is, but also too just to see it like, wow. It's still somewhat rare, and it doesn't have to be. But I hear from so many people. There was we had participated in Dragon Con Labor Day weekend, and there were a few young ladies who said, I thank you for being here because I'm the black sheep in my family. My family wants to pray around dinner, and I'm just like, no. One young lady said that she couldn't tell her mother she's an atheist because she would kill her. It would kill her. It would hurt her so badly to know that her daughter was an atheist, which it shouldn't. But unfortunately, this is the type of mentality that we're dealing with. And when you have that extra baggage from your own community, it says a lot, and sometimes it can be a lot of pressure that is put on folks. So for them to just know that we exist and that we are here for them, it does say a lot. And that's where my focus is for the organization, is to make sure that we continue to increase our visibility to show we are out there, that you can reach out and touch us and contact us and speak with us, because that's what people need. The internet is a great place to start. It's a great way to find information, but it's also good to see folks in person, and this is what we encourage more people to do.
Mandy, so where do you think the pressure is mostly coming from for the black community to be religious? Is that coming from the majority white community, or is it coming the primary influence from the black community itself? Like, I remember Steve Harvey telling a woman, don't ever date an atheist, and that kind of prejudice seems odd coming from a minority man.
Right. Well, I'll tell you that most of there's this tradition, and I spoke on this at the last conference where I spoke, but there is this tradition, there's this traditional tie to the church that the black community has. One stemming from slavery and having to adapt Christianity as the religion, but once slavery ended and after Reconstruction, when the Jim Crow laws were enacted, that basically disfranchised blacks and basically reinforced, a system of injustice and racism. The church was the institution where most blacks could gain any sort of prominence, could gain that sense of it helped to build the community. It helped establish schools and other social programs, and it was just a place where most blacks were able to feel safe for the most part. So that has just become, it had become such a part of our community that it was basically, I would say it was basically interwoven into the identity of the black community. So it comes from, for the most part. So therefore, if you stop believing, or if you stop going to church, especially if you stop believing and you identify as atheist, for one, atheism is still seen as something that is inherent to only white people. So if you're black and atheist, it's like you're rejecting your identity as being black, for one. And then it's like, you want to be like those white folks. So those are, and then there is also an ignorance surrounding it too, because our community does have a history of folks who have challenged religion, who have challenged the church. Carter G. Woodson, who was the founder of Negro History Week, which later became Black History Month, was one of them. He was very, very critical of the church and religion. And the legacy of the church has hijacked our sense of identity as a community. And so that's all some people know or care to recognize, folks like Steve Harvey, for example. And so there's a lot of ignorance surrounding what an atheist is, as well as the fact that atheists do exist in our community, which is bad. It really, really is. We still have a ways to go when it comes to being more open-minded and more progressive about other philosophies in our community. So there's a historical aspect there that is tied into, what we're dealing with today that just really needs to change.
Why isn't there more outrage that this is the religion of the slavers? This was the religion much of the occupying force, basically, that was forced on the people, yet they seem to gloss over that in favor of, like you said, the community and a safe place. Why is there less, and why can't we use that to leverage against the community to sort of revolt against the tradition of the slavers of Christianity? They use that as an excuse to take slaves in a lot of ways.
Well, because of the fact that the church has been pretty much the backbone, and it does seem like, when you just push that aspect, when you're trying to force it, when it seems like, people, when people hold something near and dear and you try to take it away from them, like throw the baby out the bathwater to an extent, it almost makes them want to hold on tighter. And so I think that there does need to be a tactful approach to this. It doesn't mean that you have to sugarcoat this information, but it's like it's easy for some outsiders to take a look in and say, well, I don't understand it. And sometimes the outsider's perspective is valid and is very helpful, but understanding the pathology of it from within, and there is a fear factor there too, even for white believers. People aren't necessarily religious because they just love the Lord. There are a lot of people who are scared to not believe. Yeah. Many people are scared of the unknown. Many people are afraid to have their notions challenged. And I'm just noticing this I've been observing this just across the board, that change is hard for many people. And so when you have this emotional attachment to the institution, especially because it has become so embedded into the culture through the music, through the entertainment, through the people, through the leaders who represent us, it can be very, very hard for folks to, to look at different viewpoints, and to also to take the bad stuff and say, well, I know it's bad, but I'm still going to hold on to it. that cultural aspect, that cultural tradition is still very, very strong. And I'll tell you that a lot of Black folks have taken the white image of Jesus, which is still an oppression tool, and they've turned it into a Black one. Somehow that this Black Jesus is the one that can save us, or that can lead us through. So many of them have compartmentalized and kind of used that as well, which the doctrine is still very harmful, and it doesn't it doesn't negate the fact that yes, it was a tool that was used to oppress. But unfortunately, when you're also dealing with the remnants of a very racist system and a system of oppression, those factors also need to be taken into consideration. So it isn't just the religion itself. The doctrine itself is bad, but also what has been committed against people of color in this country is also bad. And so, and looking at the faces of it, you have to understand why it folks may not necessarily be ready to, to consider that part of it. There are many of us who have, but somehow this notion that religion and spirituality are just still innately, inherent to our identity as a people is going to be hard to shake. So, I think for some folks there needs to be some, and we also must realize that not everyone is going to stop believing, but for those who have, for those who get it, we can definitely start there.
She's Mandisa Thomas. You're listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. And Mandisa, of course, coming in on Saturday to speak on Sunday here at the Myth Information Conference #2. Get your tickets now at mythicistmilwaukee.com. Also, if you like the content of this great show and the great guests that we have from around the country, please consider contributing to our Patreon page. You can pledge as little as $1 a show or $1 a month. Work it out yourself at Patreon.com. Look for Mythicist Milwaukee. How's it going with BN? Is you getting a boost from things like Arian Foster in attendance and membership at all? Or tell us how the effort's going with Black Nonbelievers.
Our efforts are actually going pretty well. We're in the process of implementing a membership, a membership program. We realize that as much as we would like for people to just automatically support us, that isn't always going to be possible. But we are implementing a membership process where when people pledge or donate a certain amount a month or a year, then there are enhanced they gain access to our events and the information, as well as so we not just the Arian Foster, but also our appearance on CBS Sunday Morning did gain us some more traffic. At our appearances at conferences also helped us to gain more support and more traffic. So the more I am very much about getting out there and engaging people in person, because again, people need to see us, they need to talk with us, they need to know that there is nothing wrong with us, and that they can be very, very comfortable engaging in discussion and fellowship with us. So we are working on some things. Yes, the Arian Foster coming out was very, very monumental. But we've been doing quite a few things over these past few years, just in our media appearances and appearances at different events, as well as our own events that have drawn more people to us, which has been a great thing.
Speaking of people coming out, especially in the Black community, I mean, I was going to ask the question, who would you love to see come out? But what about President Obama? I mean, is there any indication that he's actually religious, or if he just gives the nod to, get the electorate? I mean, that to me would seem to be the number one minority I'd love to see come out, or at least give the nod to atheism.
I know that during his presidency, Obama has started acknowledging the presence of nonbelievers, or that nonbelievers are represented in the United States. As far as his identity as a nonbeliever, I know that he said that his mom was a secular humanist, So he has been exposed to humanist principles and philosophies for sure. I'm not sure if he would ever say that he is a non-believer or an atheist. That would be awesome. But I'm not sure if he ever would. And if he doesn't, that's okay. But for someone who is Black to acknowledge, we need for definitely more Blacks who are leaders to acknowledge that there is a presence of atheists and non-believers within our own community. Our community has always been diverse, and that information doesn't need to be glossed over, coming out and speaking openly about this. And so it's time for our inclusion in this as well. I would say that I would love for Jay-Z to actually say that he's an atheist or a non-believer. Because if you've ever followed his music from his first album, Reasonable Doubt, he says a lot of he has a lot of lyrics that basically points to him being a non-believer. I would love for him to come out as an atheist. I'm not sure if he would, but that would just be great.
That would be huge. Do you have him on speed dial? Does he answer the phone for you?
Yeah, I wish.
Don't we all? Yeah, that would be huge. I had no idea about that, but that'd be about as big as it gets.
Well, the tag team with Beyonce.
Right.
Double it up.
So you can
right.
you can
well,
find...
you know, also too in the Wu-Tang camp, I think the genius, the Jizza. I read a while ago that he was teaming up with Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson on like a science/hip hop project. And now, if he would strike me as being someone who's either a non-believer or an atheist. So, I mean, if he was, that would be great. But you know, I think he might, and he's also like my no offense to Killer Priest, but the genius, the Jizza, is my favorite Wu-Tang member. Especially for his lyrical content. But I hope to speak with him about that more in person when we get to Milwaukee.
I want to see. I want to see Neil deGrasse throw down freestyle at the mic, man. That's interesting.
He is just like the awesome. He incorporates his love for science, and he does it in an entertaining way, and that is just so awesome. And I think there are so many in our community who don't seem to understand that it is okay to have incorporate that balance of having fun with education and learning. You know, I think that tends to turn people off. I know it would turn me off. I definitely don't want my children to think that learning is a chore, because when people think it's a chore or it's something that is painstaking, then it stops. So, you know, I think the more we, fun with learning and understanding that it is okay to let our hair down and work on those internal struggles, because there's a lot of baggage that comes along with leaving your religious belief behind and belief in God behind. It is very emotionally painstaking for a lot of people. And there are many who have felt so isolated for so long that it can be difficult. So, you know, it's not impossible, but I think the different ways that we get this message across will really, really help our diversity as a community.
How much do you get involved with schools at all? Is that in the future for Black Nonbelievers? I see we're looking at a link here where Jizza took his rapping to Bronx High School and rapped about science with the kids. I had no idea that he was a popularizer of science himself. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and I'm going back to your blog where you mentioned that rational and critical thinking is at an all-time low in the community, and that's tied directly to religion. So how do we get this message out into schools a little better?
Well, you know, honestly, and I'm not going to speak for because I don't have like any stats and data. You know, I'm just going by my public school experience, as well as being a mother and interacting with my sons and my children in their schools. At some point, I do want to get involved, even though a lot of our focus is more on community building and development. I think that while the public school education system definitely has its flaws, they are basically teaching, or they are basically implementing the basics of what children need as far as their education and the critical thinking process. The problem is when they get out of school and they're dealing with these other institutions that basically are indoctrinating them to go against what they're learning in school. So I really think that there is a lot already that's out there for kids to do very well. It's a lot of the adults who have been indoctrinated, who have been conditioned. And I think that, there is no one who should be above learning things and learning things differently, or relearning or rethinking what is already out there. There's already a lot of good information out there. But it's just a matter of getting people to look at things differently. Now, hopefully at some point we as an organization will be able to work on some programs with the schools, especially for those who are definitely more passionate about the specific education focus, to show that, hey, it's good for us to, first of all, show that there are non-believers out there, what an atheist is, what our thought processes are, what we do, how we get involved, as well as how harmful some of these other quote-unquote these other existing organizations, how harmful they can actually be to the children, like Boy Scouts, for example, and I know there's been a huge fight with them, especially on their anti-LGBT stance. This is something that I think the children should be aware of. And at some point, we absolutely will need to do some partnering, and I'm all about partnering and collaborating with other organizations, especially when it comes to education and progressive means and measures. I certainly don't think that we should reinvent any wheels, because they don't have to. I don't think they have to be, but it's a matter of helping people to reevaluate and rethink what they've been taught.
Really. Speaking of education, and I know we've been talking a lot about Christianity here, and you mentioned too that this emotional attachment and identity, that you might lose your black identity if you go atheist. Did this have anything to do with like the rise of the Nation of Islam? I wondered if you could speak to that at all.
Oh, yes. Well, the Nation of Islam, which gained prominence back in the 50s and 60s, especially under Malcolm X, it was promoted as being the religion for the black man. For the longest time, the face of Christianity was a white Jesus, which was very instrumental in, which I would say was very instrumental as far as, an identity crisis in our community. You're looking at a God that is an image of something that looks nothing, it doesn't represent you as a people at all. And when you're told that, the darker you are, the uglier you are, this definitely helps to create a complex in folks. So when the Nation of Islam came along, it was basically, denouncing the image of the white Jesus and Christianity, which as when we discussed earlier about Christianity being the slave master's religion, that is something that the Nation of Islam heavily promoted, and which sparked a lot of black folks to actually leave and jump over to the Nation of Islam, because it was being seen as a religion that identified more with black folks and the conditions of the community. So but unfortunately, that's another. It was just basically jumping from one emotional ship to another, because it was very, very dogmatic, against against white people in general, which which I think should always be taken subjectively, because it is important for everyone, blacks, whites, whoever, to know the history of what has happened without becoming so angry that we don't learn from it. But it was basically jumping from one ship to another, and they are they are still gaining some traction in certain communities where you're getting the folks riled up emotionally and getting. Unfortunately, it seems that anger seems to get people. I think it's unfortunate because while it is good, it is important for us to recognize what we go through, get angry enough to want to change it or to get, involved enough. If your platform is strictly anger, then nothing is changing, then you're not learning, and then you end up repeating the same mistakes that you accuse others of making. And so unfortunately, there are people who are still drawn to this ideology that the Nation of Islam promotes, and it's just as bad, it's just as dogmatic as Christianity.
That's interesting. Was there any competing like secular or atheist movements with like the Nation of Islam? At that time, trying to keep the black identity, but instead of moving to another religion, just to reject it, or was it just too early for that?
I think it was too early. Malcolm X, before he was assassinated, was forming the Organization for African American Unity, which his parents were followers of Marcus Garvey, who was the father of Black nationalism and the conscious movement. And then he was brought into the Nation of Islam fold. Once he left, after he connected with so many leaders from different backgrounds, he was forming this organization that was not religious in nature, but was going to help bring leadership and change to the black community. And religion was not at the it would have been at the forefront. So basically, it would have been more of a secular organization than I think the religious community was willing to accept. I think that was probably the closest that would have come to that. And how powerful would that have been, that you have black Christians, black Muslims, or black nonbelievers, or people from different backgrounds and philosophies working together for the betterment of the community. So this isn't a new concept. It was something that was certainly envisioned by folks before, but as far as executing it, it is still very, very new. So there weren't any, that would have been a huge competing factor that many weren't ready for.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, you couldn't have accused him of being a sellout, especially because he was in the fold for a while. So, that really would have had some pull. It's a good point. Thanks.
You're listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. It is time for our feature, which we like to call Myth of the Day. Are you ready, Antonio? With Myth of the Day. He's nodding yes, he's ready. He's in the breach. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, with Myth of the Day, Antonio.
He's always ready.
Thank you again, Mandisa, for being here today. We greatly appreciate this opportunity. The Myth of the Day today will have two pieces. First, as always, I'd like to thank the retweets and favorites. Steve Shives, star secular YouTube blogger. James Kirkwall, Chicago secular blogger and speaker. Rob Moore, founder, Kenosha Racine area freethinker. Dr. Richard Carrier, mythicist scholar. Carolyn Hippolyte, author. Paul Provenza, comedian, actor, secular leader, and coordinator of the Reason Rally. Miguel Connor of Aeon Byte Radio, host and author. Also, Free Thought Alliance Milwaukee, Megan Beer, Kryptonian Atheist, Uncouth Atheist, Atheist Goat. Samir Bhattacharya, Ugo Sells, Bradley Keenan. Thank you all for retweeting today and favoriting some big names there. Myth of the day, we'll start out with Samuel L. Jackson, a quote. It states, "Religion is something that is deeply ingrained into black culture. Most black people, especially entertainers, come from a Christian background. This is evident at every award show when the first thing award recipients do is thank God when accepting an award. Religion is such a part of the culture that people often think there is no such thing as a black atheist." That is Myth of the Day 1. One other quick Myth of the Day is that similar to current sentiments among many across the Muslim world with regards to the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad within the early Christian church, the depiction of Christ in pictorial form was also controversial. In fact, the only Christian art for which we have around the first century was written and physical evidence is art in the form of symbols that could be used either in a non-Christian or in a Christian context. Consequently, it is generally not possible to distinguish a Christian use of a given image on an object of the period from that of a non-Christian use. There is no physical description of Jesus contained in any of the canonical Gospels except light from heaven, or a man with white blazing wool, or bronze glowing in a furnace. His face shone like the sun shining in all its brilliance. And there is no scholarly agreement on the race and appearance of Jesus over the centuries. He has been depicted in a multitude of ways, and that is today's myth of the day.
My mom had a picture of Jesus, and he was creamy white in color with a freshly washed brown locks on the wall. I grew up with that one.
And blue eyes, too?
No, I think they were soft brown. I don't think he had blue eyes. That was a little too much. I don't think they could sell a blue-eyed Palestinian even in
Swedish Jesus.
Swedish Jesus. We are talking to Mandisa Thomas, of course. This is the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I want to get out another shout for the Myth Information Conference coming up on the 27th. Get your tickets now at mythicistmilwaukee.com. They're $35 online, but you got to pay $40 at the door. You don't want to lose $5, so get out there and get a ticket now, and also one for the pre-party the night before. It's 15% sale right now. Really, I'm being whispered at. It's a 15% sale right now.
Limited
Get online
time.
during the show today and save even more. You mentioned Mandisa Marcus Garvey, and I read that you. I don't think we talked about this before. Maybe we did. That you were raised a black nationalist. Can you tell us what that means to be a black nationalist?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yes, I did mention Marcus Garvey is the father of black nationalism. I was raised, my parents, I was born in 1976. I'm dating myself now, and there was a strong identification with black history, black culture, being proud to be black. And that was the school of thought that I was raised under. I learned a lot about black history and culture growing up. I learned a lot about what the systemic racism and injustice that took place, that was committed against blacks in this country and throughout the world, and as well as through other peoples throughout the world. And so I learned about the slave trade very early and how blacks were forced to be Christian. So, and there is a strong sentiment of anti-white among many in the community. You're taught to, if not to outright hate, you're definitely taught to be mindful and to give, to keep an open eye out for white folks. And I mean, it was very, very good for learning. Like I said, I learned a lot. There's a lot of education involved, but some of it does involve romanticizing African history and culture, because this was information that was very much hidden from black folks in not just elementary schools, but just in general. You didn't learn. It's only been within recent years that the public schools actually taught black history in depth. So there was a lot of information that black folks didn't get until about the 60s and 70s. And so, that was, that is very that can make you very angry. So, but I definitely had that. I had that background of, like I said, black is beautiful. Most everything. What's interesting, and I laugh about this, was that I remember in my household we weren't allowed to get any white greeting cards with white people on it. Because that is, that was something that was, considered like, very taboo and forbidden. You just didn't do that. So, there were a lot of us who were sort of raised into being there, to identifying very much with black culture and what it means to be black. Of course, as we get older, those kind of get, that kind of get skewered, along some lines there. But that is pretty much, and Marcus Garvey is is considered the father of Black nationalism with his forming of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, and he started the Back to Africa movement. He encouraged Black folks to support Black businesses and to be more independent and self-reliant. So that is something that can be very much taken from his philosophy that is good for everyone to know about. And I grew up learning a lot about that, and I take nothing away from it because there are still, there's a lot about Black history that a lot of folks don't know, and it's good for people to know. And that's sort of what I'll be going into that in my presentation at the conference, which will be informative and entertaining. I never fail to get folks to say, "Wow, I never heard of this, or I never thought about it this way." But that's the whole point of what we do, is to show that from different communities there are many different things you can learn.
What do your kids think of what you're doing? Do they share your beliefs about religion? Or are they not old enough?
I have a 17-year-old daughter who just started college. She does identify as an atheist, and I have exposed them to, they know about Black Nonbelievers. They know about what I do. In fact, my boys were featured in the CBS Sunday Morning segment when we taped it, and you were able to see them. They're not necessarily sure where they stand. They know they're aware of where I stand. I don't force being an atheist on them. They certainly can make up their own minds and make their own decisions. But my daughter decided to identify as an atheist when she was a teenager, and I'm very proud of her for doing that, because she's very, very passionate about LGBT rights and issues and causes. So that's also another area of passion of hers. And I just hope that my children take away from my activism and what I do is that if there's something that is important to them, then they have every right to stand on it, and they shouldn't back down, especially if there is something that is important to them and that they want to speak up on. They have every right to speak up on whatever it is that is bothering them, and if they want to get involved, they are certainly empowered to do that. They have the power to affect and create change if that is their life choice, especially if it means helping others, because I certainly want them to understand that to be empathetic and to care about other people. But they aren't forced to be involved. They do come with me to certain events. They do help out a bit, so they are aware. The community has come to know them, especially here in the Atlanta area. But they certainly are not forced to be involved because they're children. And I do want them to enjoy their childhood as much as they can before they decide that they want to become involved with anything activist related.
That's cool. Speaking of children, do you have any thoughts on the mandatory Pledge of Allegiance in schools?
I certainly detest it. I certainly don't think it should be mandatory for children. I do instruct my children that they are not to say under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, whether they remember that or not, that's I can't always say. But I do instruct them that they are not to say under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't think it should be mandatory. I think that is something that does need to change.
Right, and that could be irrespective. If somebody said that you were then forcing atheism on the kids, that you would say, even if they decided that they had professed a religion, you could also say that you shouldn't say under God, even if you do subscribe, right?
Right. Yeah. Because first of all, which God are you referring to?
Great point.
I really wish that they would take it out of the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't in the original one. And then also to pledge allegiance to this country, especially as someone Black, who the legacy for the legacy of America has not always been a good one for all of us. we're pledging allegiance to a flag that, which in this nation has discriminated against my ancestors, that has not been fair to my ancestors. Why should my children be obligated to pledge allegiance to this flag?
That's true.
Indeed. I think we all agree that it stems from a time when the need for nationalism was a little bit greater in terms of the effects of treason. And, of course, I'm referring to the 1700s. So I think that the pledge in schools is a little bit outdated, like all of us. We are talking to Mandisa Thomas. We got about 10 minutes left, and I got a few questions for you. But I wonder if, with just 10 minutes left, you want to give us a little preview without a spoiler alert here. What you're going to talk what you're going to talk about in a week?
Sure. The title of my talk is called Never an Anomaly, and I will be talking about how some Black comedians and writers have challenged religion throughout the years. I'm going to be showing some clips that'll make you laugh, and I'll be presenting some works of mine that were a favorite. That the inspiration came when I was thinking of one of my favorite books, and how and thinking about the climate of religion in the Black community, and I saw, wait a minute, this wasn't the case with everyone. And I hate to do the whole not all, but people do need to realize that not all of us. We didn't always take things sitting down. I don't like that the legacy of our community seems that we're docile, or that we prayed our way through everything. If you study Black history, you realize there were a lot of people who fought, and there were a lot of people who resisted the conditions, and they resisted what was going on. And so religion was also one that was challenged by our very people. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they were atheists or non-believers, but certainly the irony was not lost on many folks in the community. And I think that it is time for us to not necessarily reclaim it, but to have people understand that this idea of challenging religion in our community is not something that is new, and that we don't need this great white hope of this idea of atheism to understand that, we've had this in our community before, and we still do. It's growing more now, but we've been able to recognize it within our own community. So it's nothing new.
Right. I mean, Frederick Douglass does come to mind as one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And was his history, is that another one of your examples of that wasn't taught? I remember learning about him, but then again, I'm dating myself too. Maybe if I was 10 years older, maybe I wouldn't have.
I think that, there are many people who don't necessarily know Frederick Douglass's legacy and how, in depth, and how he challenged, religion and challenged the church. He's not one of my examples in this presentation, but I do mention Frederick Douglass, and on the African American Humanism's website, they feature Frederick Douglass as well, along with some other notable Black humanists and freethinkers. So he's definitely one to read more up on, if you're looking for more information about that. Definitely Lorraine Hansberry was one. If you're not familiar with her, she wrote the book and the stage play A Raisin in the Sun. And she identified as a freethinker. She very much had a freethinking character in that piece of work. And it was a Black woman. So I think that is definitely worth noting. But there are some other examples that I will feature, and I hope that it compels folks to look more into their literary and comedic work, and so give it a different view. That okay, well, even though the Steve Harveys of the world exist, those who are ignorant about atheism and non-belief, that there are many Blacks in our community who weren't. And so hopefully it will compel them to read up more and to gain more information and clarity about these folks.
I've been reading a lot of slave narratives at my school. I actually go to a Catholic school, all girls.
Okay.
And they even we're wondering, even in this in that kind of environment, why are they using the same beliefs as their captors for comfort? I mean, they were even recognizing this I don't know the word for it. Come on, guys.
Dichotomy, or
Yeah. They're,
Yeah.
they're the smart ones who know big words around here.
Yeah.
But there was, a common thread that to learn to read and write was a way to empower yourself. And
Right.
it was trying to be vented. And then people tried to prevent them from learning it. And they pointed out maybe the Bible was one of the things that was available to them to learn to read and write.
Well, actually, no. The Bible was the only book that was allowed for interpretation. During slavery, it was illegal to read and write, and certainly there were some slave pastors who were allowed to expand their education a little bit, but that was basically to preach, to the people. But fear and comfort are very powerful tools for people, not even just slaves, but just for people in general. And some people are willing to throw out the bad parts in favor of the good, even if it isn't all. And it's something that I don't always understand. But there are some folks who, they just go to church because that's what they've been doing for the longest time. They've been taught not to question it. They've just been taught to, and not to look too deep into it, because if you do, something bad might happen to you. And that has just been the culture and the tradition of the church in these communities but there have been some folks who have questioned it, and that it never sat well with them. But unfortunately, when it comes to your social circles and when it comes to your networking in a community, some people are willing to overlook that or not to look into it further, which is sad, but unfortunately it does happen. And I think that's probably why some people remain believers, even in the midst of them having a very full formal education. That fear can be a very powerful tool. If you have to think about the afterlife and what happens when we die, that's something that is scary for a lot of people. And I will say myself included. I'm unsure of the unknown, but I could just never reconcile if there's an afterlife, especially if there's no evidence. But for some other people, they're able to compartmentalize that. I don't understand it. I don't pretend that I'll be able to understand or change it for everyone. But for those that do, for those that are there, those are the ones that we are definitely supporting and looking to bring out.
You mentioned that you felt it important to get out and be a visible public presence in our movement. Tell me about DragonCon. You mentioned it earlier, and how does it fit in with our? What is it? Is it just dragons or?
Yeah, no. DragonCon is an annual convention in the Atlanta area. It's similar to Comic-Con. There's a lot of people who are in the movie and television industry, there's a big parade that happens every Saturday, and there are a lot of folks who they're in the science, sci-fi. There's a paranormal presence there. There's also a skeptic track, which is what we were a part of. And it basically, for many of us in our community, we're considered like the social outcasts, the geeks, or the nerds, the smart ones. And there were a lot of folks there. It was basically, if you weren't dressed in costume, you were the odd person out. It was normal to be in costume there, and whereas you can't do that in your everyday life. So this is a type of convention that people can come to and sort of feel like at home, and and really caters to their interests. Some are still very much believers. We ran into mixed couples, folks who were believers, and then some non-believers, and many who considered themselves skeptics, agnostics. So there was a nice crowd of folks there, and for them to see a dedicated organization for Black Nonbelievers and other organizations, secular organizations that were represented, it's like, wow, you mean to tell me that there is actually a movement behind this, which was great for them to see, because like I said before, even if some didn't necessarily consider it, if they didn't consider it necessary to openly identify, they certainly began to understand why there was a need to build this community.
I think you're in the center of a lot of conventions. Atlanta's a big convention headquarters, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There's a lot of stuff that takes place here. Like our 5th anniversary celebration that's coming up in January of next year, that will be an OK weekend. So we certainly hope that folks will check that out.
Fantastic. And of course, one more time, you are coming in next week. We're down to the last minute, so we're going to wrap it up here. It's the Myth Information Conference 2. Mandisa Thomas speaking on the topic of Never an Anomaly, entertainers, comics, and others who have used their skepticism in their art in the past in the community. We can't wait to see you on Saturday, and thanks for joining us again today, Mandisa.
Very glad to be here. Thank you very much. Looking forward to being in Milwaukee next weekend.
All right, I want you to stay on the line here after we wrap it up, if you would, so we can talk to you about a couple of details. And
Sure.
join us again on the Mythicist Milwaukee show in 2 weeks. Of course, next Sunday will be the conference itself. There won't be a podcast, but after that, we will be talking to Courtney Lynn, atheist author of children's books. So we'll be looking forward to that.